With Zach Wilson being benched, does that make Mike White a possible streamer this week? That and so much more on today's episode of the Mailbag Show. Jeff, I got so excited with the fact that you were joining us today that I forgot we were talking about Zach Wilson and not Jeff Wilson. But go ahead and start us off. Is Mike White a possible streamer in your fantasy leagues?
Certainly not in one quarterback leagues. I couldn't imagine that. Mike White's not going to be bringing any rushing upside to this. And, maybe in deeper super flex, the thing that to realize this week, we don't have any buys this week. It's kind of interesting that we're not done with buys yet, but we don't have any buys this week. And so that pool is a little bit deeper than what you've gotten used to over the last couple of weeks because we've been experiencing those 4, 6, whatever it might be, teams on a buy at the same time. Now I've got White right now. I've got him ranked like about quarterback 29, like towards the back end. And I just don't see, I think he's going to improve the efficiency of the passing game for the Jets because how can he not improve the efficiency for the passing game for the Jets? And this offense has to flow through the passing game because the lack of Breece Hall, they just are not able to run the ball like they were earlier in the season. But, throwing back to earlier in the season when they had Joe Flacco, they threw the ball so many times. So it'll be interesting to see what the offense looks like, but not a streamer for me.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is we've seen kind of 3 different Jets offenses now. We saw a little taste with Mike White last year. We've seen the kind of failed experiment with Zach Wilson. And then we saw this air raid attack to start the season with Joe Flacco throwing like 60 times a game. So, I think a lot of people have expectations that it's going to look a lot like the Joe Flacco-led offense that we saw early in the season, but they were kind of passing out of necessity because they were down so often. I don't know if we're going to necessarily see that with Mike White. So, Troy, kind of same question to you. Are you looking at Mike White as a potential streamer, or is it best to maybe wait a week?
I even waiting a week. I don't know if I'm gonna feel comfortable streaming Mike White unless we see some of that magic from last year, and we see where people were saying last year, maybe we rewind the tape because last year people were saying that they should have started Mike White over Zach Wilson, even when Zach Wilson was healthy. Maybe now that doesn't sound so crazy, but no, I think I'm with Jeff where maybe in super flex leagues, like deeper super flex leagues, because some people were starting Zach Wilson, right? And last week he gave you 77 yards. So if you're that desperate at quarterback, yeah, I think you can plug him in as your QB2. I would rather wait to see what happens, but I don't know if it's going to look like the Joe Flacco offense. It certainly shouldn't look like the Zach Wilson offense. It's probably going to look somewhere in the middle. So I'm optimistic that it'll look better with Mike White, but I'd rather play other options.
Yeah, and I think Superflex is a completely different question. I mean, in Superflex leagues, pretty much anybody that is starting and has a pulse, you're going to find yourself having to fit into a lineup at some point. But like you said, no bye weeks this week, but there's always that guy that's hoarding 4 quarterbacks and then a handful of extras that have an extra, and you might be that guy that's starting Mike White. But what I do want to say about this offense, and this isn't about Mike White specifically, but I kind of want to just open a little bit of a conversation here about what this Jets offense could look like now that we are outside of Zach Wilson, because, last year, Mike White was supporting Michael Carter as literally an RB1. I mean, he was putting up great numbers, averaging over 22 points per game with Mike White. This year, to start the season, Garrett Wilson was an absolute stud, pulling 11 targets and 75 yards per game, and then was pretty much non-existent with Zach Wilson. And then Elijah Moore, who was putting up wide receiver 1 numbers for a little stretch last year, is he suddenly back in the conversation as somebody you want to stream? So let's change the conversation from Mike White. And Jeff, talk to us a little bit about some of these other skill players in New York and some other guys that you might be excited about now that Zach Wilson isn't the starter.
Garrett Wilson's the primary option there in that offense. And yeah, he had big to start the season, slow down. But then the last 3 weeks, not this past week, before, he was right in that fringe of that wide receiver 1 territory, right in the wide receiver 15, 16 area. He was putting up very good production there. He just had a very down week last week. That would be the play out of this. We've seen production come from Tyler Conklin. If you're desperate at tight end, you could potentially go with Conklin. yeah, if you're in a PPR league, then Michael Carter probably becomes a start just because how much volume really flow through that running back attack. I don't see it with Elijah Moore. There's something else going on there that the snaps just aren't there. There's just nothing underlying to support believing that Elijah Moore is going to be back to being back just because they're switching quarterbacks here. They've been playing Denzel Mims a lot more lately, and that's kind of where I land. But I think Garrett Wilson is definitely a start because I do think they're going to be able to have more efficiency out of that passing offense, and then Michael Carter as well.
Yeah, and I'd say Garrett Wilson is, obviously a start and hopefully can be, that late season wide receiver one hammer that we see rookies become so often. So, Troy, is there anything else that you'd like to add? I think we're all in agreement here that Garrett Wilson sees a significant bump. Michael Carter probably falls into like a top 20, top 24 running back. Is there anybody else that's kind of piquing your interest here?
No, not really. I want to just go back to the Elijah Moore take. I feel that it's funny. I've actually been getting some trade offers for like trying to trade me Elijah Moore and trying to tell me that he's, his stock's going up and all that. But I'm with Jeff. It's just like, unless because his snap count isn't going to look like last year, right? There's nothing that indicates that over the next week. Oh, Mike White started. Okay, Robert Saleh is going to increase Elijah Moore's snap rates like 80%. That doesn't seem like very likely, right? Maybe he makes his 3 targets more efficient per game, maybe. But I feel like that's at the end of the day, I'm not excited. So I don't go just feeling overly optimistic about Elijah Moore just because of the QB change. I just want to kind of warn people about that. But I'm echoing everything you guys said. I'm actually really interested in Michael Carter. I feel like, to me, outside of Garrett Wilson, who's I feel like the clear winner, and Corey Davis, I think, is coming back soon. So we might see him a little bit more involved. So I like Corey Davis definitely over like Elijah Moore.
Yeah. All of a sudden, all of these guys that we had seemingly forgot about over the last few weeks are back on the fantasy radar. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to another episode of the Footballguys Mailbag Show. Coming at you a little bit early this week. We got a holiday week. Hope you all enjoy your Thanksgiving tomorrow. Hopefully you get a chance to spend some quality time with your families. As you can see, Victoria could not make it today, so we are joined with Jeff Bell, also with my other co-host who has been here since day one, Troy King. So, Jeff, let everyone know where they can find you on Twitter, Instagram, wherever you are on social media these days.
Yeah, you can see it on the screen. And For Whom J Bell Tolls on Twitter, the number 4. You can find me on the Footballguys College Football Show, and that gets released on Wednesdays. And so right now we're getting ready for Rivalry Week. That's going on in college football right now. And then you can find me on Thursday nights on the Audible with our own Sigmund Bloom and Matt Waldman hanging out there on every Thursday night. Not this week because of Thanksgiving, but next week we'll pick it right back up and we'll be going. And then Footballguys, of course, and everything through Footballguys. I released an article on Monday that really just kind of dives through the week's action. Please make sure to check that out. And it's labeled as Dynasty, but if you're a fantasy football player in general, it is a great resource, I think, and I put a lot of work and time into that. And then we've got other roundtable articles that come out through the week as well, a college football roundtable, and then a Dynasty Rankings Movement roundtable that we really kind of dive in and look at guys shifting values up and down in Dynasty.
Yeah, absolute content machine putting stuff out every single day. And I was going to say that your Dynasty Roundup, which you have titled that, I think is kind of given a disservice to that article, because even if you're playing redraft or even if you're just a fan of the NFL, it's definitely worth checking out. Down at the bottom of the screen, Troy, let everyone know where they can find you on social media as well.
You guys can find me at T King Mode, basically in all social media platforms, but my home base is on Twitter. So if you really want to see fancy analysis, jokes, laughs, whatever, follow me on Twitter at T King Mode.
And I'm Dave Kluge. You can find me at Dave Kluge on Twitter. But most importantly, be sure to subscribe at youtube.com/footballguys if you have not already. Not only do we have this show coming at you every single week, but we have our short videos. We've got the Audible. We've got the Launchpad. We've got the Dynasty newsletter show. So much more. So be sure to check all of that out at youtube.com/footballguys. Now, we start the show off with some pre-submitted questions, and then we jump into the chat. I already see some of these chat questions coming in, so keep dropping them, and we will get to them after a few of these questions. Next one comes in, though, from our good friend Jimbo Swenson, and Jimbo says, can I trust Cam Akers now? Is he the RB1? I'm desperate at running back. For anybody who isn't aware, Darrell Henderson was waived by the Los Angeles Rams, so now we have this maybe committee of Cam Akers, Kyron Williams, Ronnie Rivers maybe getting in the mix. Who really knows? Troy, start us off here. Can we trust Cam Akers this week?
Trust is a very strong word. So he actually had his best game yardage wise on the ground, where he tied a season high with 61 yards. So that's something, and I don't know. I feel that with Cam Akers, I'm not overly excited. The Rams are still bad. I think the Kyron Williams, I think he's more interesting in Dynasty, but I'm not really interested in either Cam Akers or Kyron Williams. The only reason I'm interested is a little bit out of desperation, right? We have a lot of running back injuries. We have a lot of unreliable production. So from the standpoint of that, but this week there's no buys. So hopefully you have enough healthy running backs where you have a different option. But if you don't, yeah, you can play him. I think he's a flex play at best who maybe possibly can find the end zone before the season ends. But I'm not overly confident in Cam Akers right now.
Yeah, I want to get Jeff's take on this. I mean, you said he just came off his best game of the season, and it was 61 scoreless yards. That doesn't inspire a lot of confidence or hope in me. But Jeff, what are you thinking about Cam Akers?
So he's not involved in the passing game. He hasn't caught a pass since week 2, and he's not getting goal line looks. He hasn't gotten a goal line look since, I believe, week 4, week 5 was the last time he got a goal line look. So it's just very hard to even imagine playing him, because you're hoping for a touchdown, but you're getting a guy that's not getting touchdowns, and you're hoping for receptions, and you're getting a guy that's not getting targets. And so, are you just kind of looking at 4 to 6 points here into your lineup? At some point, if you have a running back with a pulse, and he's a running back with a pulse that should touch the ball, they enter your lineups if depending on how your roster build is. But at the same time, I think Kyron Williams has taken that passing game role there. And I don't know that this is an offense I want any part of. Bottom line, full stop, especially if Matthew Stafford, we saw him pulled last week with that concussion. We saw a concussion a couple weeks before that. So I don't even know what his status is going to be this week. I think that if they play Bryce Perkins, that might be an interesting guy as a 2 quarterback, like just a super flex, because he can run the ball. But other than that, this offense is just really struggling.
Yeah, and pretty much everybody on this offense now, with Cooper Kupp out for presumably the rest of the season, everybody's touchdown or bust. I mean, Allen Robinson, every once in a while, he stumbles into the end zone and gives you a top 20 finish. Cam Akers, that's what you're hoping for with him. Kyron Williams, yeah, he's got the pass down role, but I don't know how much that's going to, help him out, especially if they make the move to Bryce Hopkins, who's going to tuck the ball and run a little bit more than checking down. So, yeah, this is just kind of a wasteland for fantasy at this point. Last week, Cam Akers didn't crack my top 50 running backs. Got to, reevaluate this a little bit now with Darrell Henderson out of town, but Darrell Henderson wasn't touching the ball that much over the last couple of weeks. So I don't know if this is a huge value shift. Yeah, I mean, you said it, Jeff. Sometimes with your roster build, you just got to start any running back with a pulse and guaranteed touches. Then you can get that from Cam Akers. But, if he doesn't stumble into the end zone, you're probably looking at no catches, somewhere between 50 to 60 yards. And there's probably better options out there. Maybe Michael Carter, who we just talked about a little bit. That's a guy that I would prefer over Cam Akers in just about every single format. Let's move on to the next question, though. And this one comes from the Pretend GM asking us, is Jameson Williams going to make a impact this week if he plays? So we got a game tomorrow on Thursday. He has returned to practice. I don't know if there are any signs yet that Jameson Williams is going to return for this Thursday game, but let's talk about maybe next week or maybe the week following. What should we be doing with Jameson Williams here? Jeff, go ahead and start us off.
You can't put him in your lineup this week unless you are very desperate. But again, the buys eliminate that desperation factor a little bit. But he is a guy that his skill set and ability, one play can make him worth starting. Like, he can score from anywhere on the field. So that enters the conversation a little bit. You just need to see some volume out of there. Now, the volume is available. We came into the season talking about if Amon-Ra St. Brown would be crowded out of this offense because they had added so much talent. Now it looks like it's Amon-Ra St. Brown and what exactly? Khalif Raymond? So there's certainly opportunities moving forward. But this offense has shifted their mindset a little bit. They're using Jason Cabina, the fullback, a lot more than what they were before, rolling with a little bit more 2 tight end sets, trying to get more of that power run game with Jamal Williams and working Justin Jackson through there. So they're changing how they are playing because I think that defense couldn't hold up. They realized it, and they made that shift away from that frenetic game pace that we saw early in the season, and that has taken a hit on the production for Jared Goff. He's a guy that he started out fantastic, but when it comes to putting this guy fresh, he hasn't even played football in a game since the national championship all the way back in January of last year. You can't put him in your lineup this week.
Troy, what are your thoughts on Jameson Williams?
Same thing. I feel like maybe next week, again, if you're desperate, maybe next week or the week after that. And he is going to be efficient, right? And just like Jeff said, he doesn't need volume in order to score you fantasy points. And that's why he was so highly touted. That's why they drafted him so high in the draft. He's explosive. He's extremely fast for those who aren't familiar with him. And I think, again, we always say, is this good for Amon-Ra St. Brown? I think he complements him well, right? And then instead of targeting Josh Reynolds or Khalif Raymond, those targets can now just go to Jameson Williams, who's far superior than DJ Chark, who's been injured, and I think he was just active again last week. And without, TJ Hawkinson, I think it should be the Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams show going forward once Jameson Williams is back to, the one we know and love.
Agree with that. I don't think you can really start him just yet, but what I will say is that Jameson Williams is a great player, and if he is still available on your waiver wire for whatever league, if you're in a shallow league or whatever it may be, pick him up right now, because what is going to end up happening if he's on your waiver wire when he is declared active, everybody is going to want to pick up Jameson Williams. Why get into a bid war and spend the remaining fab that you have to try and get Jameson Williams when you can likely pick him up for right now? I mean, if he's available, drop what you're doing right now. That's okay. We're going to be here for another half hour or so. You can come back, but go pick up Jameson Williams. We're looking at a guy who is 6'1" with a 4.3 flat 40. I mean, he is as explosive as they come. And this isn't just a Deshaun Jackson going to blow the top off the defense and not do anything else. He's much more well-rounded and polished as a receiver than people realize. No discredit or, disrespect meant to Amon-Ra St. Brown, but I think that Jameson Williams just has a better toolkit and will be the wide receiver one here. So pick him up. Don't start him in your lineup immediately, but the contingent upside, the potential upside is there for Jameson Williams. So you should pick him up immediately. Before we get to this next question, though, we just saw this came in from Mr. Scampers, our favorite cat in the chat, dropping some news here. Darrell Henderson claimed by the Jaguars. Wow. So let's just riff on this for a quick second before we get into the next question. This doesn't impact Travis Etienne at all, does it? Troy, start us off here. Are you concerned at all? I mean, we're shooting from the cuff here. What do you think? Is this
no, I wouldn't say concerned, but I think it's actually a smart move, right? Jermichael Hasty was the RB2. So I feel like it's just a strong depth play. I feel like Darrell Henderson isn't a bad running back. And look, in case of injury, thankfully, Travis Etienne has been healthy. Knock on wood, hopefully continue to stay healthy. But if God forbid anything happens, Darrell Henderson is a very capable running back for that team. And I think that they'll trust him over Jermichael Hasty to, lead the way. So I think it's a very smart pickup by the Jags. We knew he was going to get picked up. I didn't expect him to be a free agent. I didn't expect him to clear waivers. So I think it's a really good signing by the Jags.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, it's just a pretty savvy move from the front office. You get a conditional pick for James Robinson and then bring in Darrell Henderson for free. I don't know if there's really a huge gap in talent between Darrell Henderson and James Robinson. So interesting move there. Thank you, Mr. Scampers, for dropping that news on us. Let's move to the next question, though. And this one comes in from Texan 27203. I picked up Deshaun Watson for next week. Should I play him against Houston? So we talked about Jameson Williams, maybe, waiting a week, see how things shake out in Detroit. And here we are with Deshaun Watson. Hasn't played in almost 2 years, playing in a new offense now. Troy, start us off here. Are you plugging Deshaun Watson into your lineup for week 13?
I guess it depends who my options are. If I've been streaming, absolutely. If I'm streaming quarterbacks, but I do want to, warn people, we haven't seen this man play in 2 years. It is would anyone be shocked if he just came out and just sucked? It's very within the realm of capability.
This preseason, and he sure didn't look too great.
Exactly. I'm saying there's a very strong chance that Deshaun Watson can suck in his first game back after 2 years. And there's going to be a lot of hype around this game. Obviously, the reunion, the going back to his old team, fighting and blah, blah, blah. So I say that I would, if you're streaming someone like, I don't know, I'd rather play him maybe over like a Trevor Lawrence or someone that's very vanilla. I feel like Deshaun Watson, we already know his upside. We know it when he's on his game, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. So I feel like if you're streaming a lower end QB, yeah, I'm gonna play him, but I'm not gonna like start him over one of my bona fide studs or anything like that.
Yeah, so I think if you're, in that unfortunate situation in a single QB league where you're kind of rotating through Kirk Cousins and Derek Carr and Geno Smith and Tom Brady, I think, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And then I think, obviously if you got Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, somebody like that, you're probably not even thinking twice about putting Watson in. But let's talk about those, kind of back end QB1s, and we'll just kind of play would you rather here. So, Jeff, and I'll throw this to you first. I think Joe Burrow is probably a step ahead of Lamar Jackson. I mean, he's been red hot right now. It looks like this offense is coming together. Would you think about playing Deshaun Watson over Joe Burrow?
No, that's comfortably Burrow. You have to go a little ways down, I think, to get into Watson, I think.
So let's move down then. Dak Prescott. Is Dak Prescott somebody you're playing over Deshaun Watson?
It becomes a matchup play, probably there. Matchup conversation between the two of them. I think that Watson probably has a little higher ceiling, but I would feel more comfortable playing Dak right out of the chute.
All right, like that one. Justin Herbert, I think, going down the rest of season rankings here, but I think Justin Herbert has elevated himself a bit with what we've seen from the last couple of weeks. Kyler Murray, if he's healthy, I think that you're probably going with Kyler, at least for now, ahead of Deshaun Watson. So, yeah, I think that's kind of where he falls in. He's in that back end QB1 conversation. So, Troy, I think you said it best. It just kind of depends who your option is. If you're streaming those veterans, Watson is somebody that you're plugging in against Houston and crossing your fingers and hoping for the best.
Yeah, like I'm playing him over Derek Carr. I'm playing him over Kirk Cousins. Geno Smith is the one. I feel like that's where I'm like, yeah, that's the line for me. Deshaun Watson and Geno. I'm like, I don't know. That's my barometer right now. It was crazy to say right now.
And looking at it, the matchup that he's going to have, Geno Smith is going to be playing against the Rams that week. So do you want Deshaun Watson against the Texans, or do you want Geno Smith against the Rams? I mean, the Rams defense hasn't really looked too great this week. So I think that one's kind of a coin flip. It's definitely an interesting decision. But again, like I said with Jameson Williams, Deshaun Watson is one of those guys that if he's available right now, pick him up. Even if you have a Josh Allen or a Patrick Mahomes or something like that, pick Watson up, because if he does end up figuring it out, sitting behind a great offensive line with a strong run game and some good wide receivers and David Njoku, I'd rather him being on my bench putting up 25 or 30 points a week than in my opponent's lineup. So Deshaun Watson is a guy that shouldn't be available on many waiver wires before we head into this week. Now let's go into the last question here, and this one comes from Marco Rodriguez. Marco is asking us, what am I supposed to do with DeAndre Swift? I have to bench him, right? Jeff, start us off here. Are we benching DeAndre Swift, crazy as that sounds?
Available options. As rough as it's been, he's scored touchdowns in 3 of his last 4, and he's been an RB2 in those games. And so he's right on that fringe there. But again, it's just, you cannot trust volume on that one. It's going to be a touchdown play. And if he doesn't get the touchdown, you're going to get burnt. And so that comes in. What can you do? Who can you start instead? I've got him right around that early RB3 range. When I did my ranks today, I'm really kind of scrubbing through, and he's sitting right about running back 30 in my ranks. And that's about where he's come in, even with those touchdowns. So that kind of even feels aggressive potentially to rank him in that position. But at the same time, he has scored. He's still been able to do that.
Yeah. And don't get too, don't get your judgment too clouded by last week's stat line, because he did get that goal line touchdown, but that was the cleanup leftover scraps after Jamal Williams already got his 3. So don't sit here and look at the goal line touch and the touchdown and think that he has any sort of goal line role. I mean, we heard it last offseason where somebody, I forget who it was, one of the coaches said that we look at Jamal Williams as our A-back, and people just thought that was crazy. And I mean, that's what he's playing as right now. So Troy, same question to you. Where does DeAndre Swift fall for you this week? Are you benching him?
I'm not benching him, but he's a flex player guy. Like, because last week, 5 attempts, he had 3 receptions. Yay. Week before that, 6 attempts, 1 reception. And a week before that, 2 attempts, 3 receptions. It's just gross. It's just someone that you're hoping. He's still talented, and we want to believe in the talent, but the volume is telling us a story of the coaching staff is not using him the way fantasy managers want him to be used. No matter how hard we wish and hope and pray, DeAndre Swift isn't going to be DeAndre Swift that we would like. And fantasy playoffs are coming. I don't want to trust that stat line in my fantasy playoffs. So if you're putting him in your lineup, you are doing an expectation of a flex play. And again, you're hoping that he falls into the end zone because you can't rely on anything else, what you see with the rushing attempts or the reception. So he's a flex play. And like Jeff been saying, available options. I'm hoping there's someone else that you can play over him.
So I'll walk you through it. I got one league that I am benching DeAndre Swift in, and I don't have stud running backs either. It's not like I've got Derrick Henry and Christian McCaffrey, and that's why I'm benching DeAndre Swift. I am benching DeAndre Swift, and I'm playing 2 running backs and a running back in my flex position. And that's Miles Sanders, Jeff Wilson Jr., Isaiah Pacheco. I'm playing all 3 of those guys over
easy.
DeAndre Swift this week, which sounds
Easy.
crazy.
I've got them all ranked over him as well. So
yeah, and it's a tough call because you probably spent a 3rd-round pick on DeAndre Swift, and you see the explosiveness when he touches the ball, but the touches, the snap count, the usage, it just isn't there. So if you are playing him, you are praying that he can rip off a big play and score. I think the best case scenario is that we see him go for 40, 50% of the snaps on your bench, because we have heard that this injury could just be lingering and it could have something to do with that. Personally, I think that Deuce Staley just hates DeAndre Swift. We saw it in Hard Knocks. We see him getting chewed out on the sidelines all the time. I think Deuce Staley just doesn't like the way that he plays the game.
I'm gonna give you some start sits, guys. Kenyon Drake, DeAndre Swift.
Oh, I have to look at my rankings.
Wait on Gus Edwards. I think I've got Drake right in front of Swift, but that's kind of dependent on. I'm very, very cautious on Gus Edwards, and if I feel a little bit more comfortable on Edwards, I think that probably would swing a little bit.
Same. Yeah, if Gus Edwards doesn't play, I'm playing Kenyon Drake over DeAndre Swift.
I can't believe we're having this conversation, but it's true. It's like this is where we are with him.
Well, and it plays into how Detroit wants to play, though, because they're playing the fullback more. They want to have that physical run game. And DeAndre Swift, they can't trust him to participate in that physical run game. He bounces everything outside. And if he doesn't have that speed to hit the edge right now because of the injury, then what do you have? And it's just they're not messing around with that. They're trying to stay ahead of the chains and riding Jamal Williams behind a fullback. And that's just how they're trying to play football right now.
Yeah, and I'm sure you guys know when you're live at a football game, your view of the field gets a little bit distorted. It's not as crystal clear as it is on TV. And I was at the Bears game 2 weeks ago, and DeAndre Swift, I had him starting in my fantasy lineup, and he caught this little pass, and he must have ran with the ball for 6 seconds. I mean, he was just carving up the entire field, and I thought that was going to be something valuable. Went back and looked at the play-by-play, picked up 7 yards. And that's like the guy was just running laterally back and forth across the field and not picking up many yards. And that's kind of the issue. And that's what I think Deuce Staley doesn't like, because Deuce Staley was a hard-nosed, drop your pads and run through somebody type of running back. That's what Jamal Williams is. And that is exactly what DeAndre Swift is not. But let's go ahead and jump into the chat questions here, because I've seen quite a few coming through. Let's go ahead and start with this first one here coming in from Clamped EZ. Pick 3, Ramondre Stevenson, Kenneth Walker, Tony Pollard, Aaron Jones, Joe Mixon. First of all, what a unit of a running back core there. Way to go and build yourself a strong team. But Jeff, start us off here. Who are you starting or who are you benching, I guess? You got to bench 2 people out of this bunch.
Well, Mixon might bench himself because of the concussion. So that probably crosses that one off. Kenneth Walker, I don't know, process of elimination here. Kenneth Walker, I think, goes into your lineup. We've just seen so much volume out of him, and he's got a great matchup against the Raiders. Pollard, I think, goes into your lineup. He's just running so hot right now. And so that I put him in there. And it really comes down to Ramondre versus Aaron Jones. And I probably, as much as Damian Harris is getting involved, I still probably feel a little bit more comfortable with Ramondre against Aaron Jones, I guess. But that's where it becomes pretty difficult for me, because I think that there's a ceiling on Ramondre that Aaron Jones probably has a bigger ceiling, and that might play into do I need to beat my opponent in this one. But the complicating factor with Mixon and Ramondre Stevenson playing on Thursday night, sometimes you have to take those games that are available instead of waiting until Sunday.
Troy, who are you benching? Which 2 out of this bunch?
Yeah, I'm assuming that Joe Mixon is going to be out with the concussion, so I'm just not thinking about him. I think I'm with Jeff. Ramondre, Kenneth Walker, Pollard.
So I guess I'll be the difference in opinion here, but I'm going to play Aaron Jones over Ramondre Stevenson, and I don't think that Ramondre Stevenson is losing his job by any means. But when he was giving us those RB1 weeks, that was while Damian Harris was either severely limited or out. I mean, we saw last week that Damian Harris was getting the carries on the ground again, and he didn't see a huge snap share, but he looked very efficient with his carries. So I think that we, Bill Belichick just switches his running back usage on a whim frequently and often. And I don't think that, like I said, I don't think that Ramondre is going to lose his starting job, but I think there's a little bit more risk with him. I'd go with Aaron Jones over Ramondre, but I think that Kenneth Walker and Tony Pollard are the two must starts out of this bunch.
Well, and I think Ramondre's taken over that James White role is the thing to consider too. And Damian Harris is going to have the Damian Harris role.
Right. And that James White role, especially in PPR leagues, is very, very valuable. It gives you a high floor and a high ceiling. So don't dislike anything about that analysis. Got a question here from Herms saying, hello, friendos. I made a trade in my 10-team PPR Dynasty League. I gave Christian Kirk and David Njoku for Dallas Goedert and a 2023 second. Grade the deal. I have Hurts as my QB1. So you're getting that nice Hurts Goddard stack. Obviously, Goddard might miss the majority of this season, if not all of it, but should be back and fine next year. So, Troy, start us off here. What do you prefer, Christian Kirk and David Njoku or Dallas Goedert and a second?
I don't know if this is tight end premium. If it's tight end premium, easily the Goddard side. Regardless, without the tight end premium, I like it. I think it's a B plus. I'm gonna give it a B plus for the Herms. B plus.
Jeff, what do you think about this one?
It would come down to, is this start 3 wide receiver with 2 flex like we see in a lot of dynasty leagues, or is this 2 wide receivers with 1 flex? I think that probably swings it potentially. I really like Christian Kirk and what they're doing with him in Jacksonville, and I feel like he's maybe arguably the best piece in a vacuum in this trade. But the tight end upgrade, Njoku is a guy that I think he had a little bit of a hot start, and obviously with the contract, Dallas Goedert is a top 3 tight end in Dynasty for me moving forward. So I think that's where I kind of would swing towards grabbing the tight end. And Troy, you mentioned tight end premium. I think that probably plays into a little bit, and having that stack is always nice.
Yeah, I think Christian Kirk is having one of the quietest wide receiver 1 seasons we've seen in recent memory. Like, everybody is trying to get rid of this guy, but he's the wide receiver 1 for Jacksonville. He's putting up top 12 production for fantasy football, and he is on a massive contract that is going to keep him as Trevor Lawrence's wide receiver 1 for the
Calvin Ridley
future.
Though it's dynasty. Are we concerned?
That's a good point.
Are we concerned about that? He's not a scrub. Like, he's gonna come.
He's also going to be 29 and 2 years off of playing football by the time he returns. So I don't know if I'm ready to plug him back in as being better than Christian Kirk at that point.
I said a couple of weeks ago that we're all going to wake up in March and we're going to say, when did the Jaguars get Calvin Ridley?
Honestly,
I
just said it. I had completely forgot. When Troy said that, I mean, I hadn't even remembered Calvin Ridley. That's a name. I'm the one that always makes fun of people for recency bias, and I forgot that Calvin Ridley existed. So it goes both ways. Next question comes in from Bronson saying, who do I trade Zeke for, Amari Cooper or Mike Evans? So I guess the question here is, who do you prefer rest of the season, Amari Cooper or Mike Evans? First of all, I'd trade Zeke for either of those guys in a heartbeat,
easy.
but who do we prefer?
Yes.
Yeah, the answer is yes, Amari Cooper or Mike Evans, both of them. But Jeff, who do you prefer, Amari Cooper or Mike Evans for the rest of this season?
I think I prefer Cooper. We've seen, I saw something the other day that he's had 5 wide receiver 1 weeks already this year, and he's getting Deshaun Watson back. We've seen Watson support top 5 wide receiver fantasies, and that's where Cooper has just been a little bit better than Mike Evans, and probably I feel a little bit better about him with Deshaun Watson in the Cleveland offense than I do with Mike Evans and Tom Brady in the Buccaneers offense right now.
Yep. I actually said that this offseason, got a ton of heat back saying that I would, I said if I had Mike Evans anywhere in Dynasty, I would trade Mike Evans for Amari Cooper and then some, and got a lot of pushback. But the peripherals over the last few seasons have been nearly identical. Cooper's a little bit younger. So obviously, I'm talking Dynasty here, but I think for this season too, you got to give the nod to Amari Cooper. So I'm with you. I prefer Amari Cooper over Mike Evans. Next question comes in from I Purify. Do I start Ramondre Stevenson or Dalvin Cook, or maybe possibly Gabe Davis? That's an interesting one. Looking at that indoor game in Detroit, it could end up being a barn burner where Gabe Davis could get something done. But Troy, start us off here. Ramondre Stevenson, Dalvin Cook, or Gabe Davis?
Dalvin Cook for me. I'm starting Dalvin. We've seen what he can do. His upside is just, I think, the highest. So
yeah, that's where I am pretty easily. Jeff, you got a different opinion here?
No, I am same place, Dalvin Cook. And Buffalo, just to note that they've moved a lot towards the running game because of Josh Allen's injury, and that kind of takes that ceiling off Gabe Davis a little bit if they're not going vertically. We saw him produce against Minnesota because of the nature of that game, but I think if they can get up on Detroit, Gabe Davis feels like a risky start this week.
Yeah, it's tough. I just, I don't understand why you draft Gabe Davis if you're not going to start him every week, because you kind of have to take the highs and the lows. If you're just spot starting him here and there, I feel like just, the fate of fantasy football, you're going to start him in those weeks when he gets 3 points and he's going to hit 35 when he's on your bench. So I feel like if you got Gabe Davis, you almost have to start him every single week, assuming you got some better wide receiver options here. But out of these three, I'm going Dalvin Cook as well. I think that's not too tough. Got another question here from Albert Marroquin saying, pick 2 in full PPR, David Montgomery, James Conner, Jeff Wilson Jr. This is a good question. This is a really good question. I'm going to throw it to one of you guys first while I think on it for a little bit. Jeff, I know you got your rankings pulled up, so talk us through. Who would you start out of these three?
So I'm pretty aggressive on David Montgomery currently. I've got him running back 9 this week, and we saw a running back 6 week last week. So that's where I've got him. I've got James Conner at running back 10. He's really taken over that Cardinals backfield, and I love Jeffrey Wilson Jr. this week. But I've got him at running back 13 against the Texans. I do love that matchup, but I think the other two, because of injuries and movement in those backfields, they've really solidified themselves as going to be the primary backs in those situations. Whereas Wilson, I feel good that he's moved in front of Raheem Mostert, and I love the matchup against Houston, but I've got him just a little bit lower than the other two.
All right. Troy, what are your thoughts on this?
I appreciate Jeff's analysis. I feel like those are all great points. I'm gonna go Monty and Jeff Wilson, but I feel like no matter what the combination, they all are smash plays. But I think I'm gonna go Monty, Jeff Wilson.
Yeah, I think all three have good matchups this week, but I'm with you, Troy. I have James Conner and Jeff Wilson right next to each other, but I do have the slight edge to Jeff Wilson Jr. I think that he has just taken over. I mean, he's been the guy in Miami. Raheem Mostert at 30 years old and not playing the best football of his life was putting up solid fantasy numbers every single week just because of this, advanced run scheme that they're putting out in Miami. And then Jeff Wilson Jr., a few years younger, a lot more juice, some fresh legs. Seems like he has been playing the part really, really well here. So,
and coming off a bye.
Yeah, coming off a bye as well. It's a tough one. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we've seen James Conner just absolutely taking over all of the touches. I mean, since Eno Benjamin is gone, what was it, 2 weeks ago? I think he had a 96 or a 94% snap share, something ludicrous. And then he's getting the goal line touches. He's getting some targets. So I get that there's a ceiling there for James Conner. It's a coin flip for me, but I'm hoping that coin flip lands on the Jeff Wilson Jr. side because I've got him slightly ahead of James Conner. Next question comes from Tim Huff. Happy Turkey Day, boys. With Rondale Moore likely trending out, do I go with Curtis Samuel or Kyron Williams this week? I put in a bid for DeMarcus Robinson, but I'm not sure if I'll get him. So 1, Curtis Samuel or Kyron Williams. 2, are you starting DeMarcus Robinson over either of these guys? Troy, what do you think?
Curtis Samuel, no. I would start DeMarcus Robinson over Kyron Williams, but I would start Curtis Samuel over both.
Jeff, what are your thoughts? This is a tough one, man. It's really tough when you're really scraping the bottom of the barrel like this. You got to start looking at matchups and potential game scripts. What do you think here?
I like DeMarcus Robinson. DeMarcus Robinson had 9 targets last week, and I think the Ravens were really looking forward to that complementary wide receiver that can step forward in their offense. And Robinson has played very well over the past month. He's kind of moved in front of Devin Duvernay in that role, and so I like him the most out of this. Now, if you're not getting him and you're narrowing it down, I do a start sit every Sunday for Football Guys in the Discord, and check it out if you got questions. And one of my favorite things to do, the way I like to answer questions, is if you need the ceiling, then I think the play is Curtis Samuel. And if you need the safe play, then I think the play is Kyron Williams. And so much that kind of lands on you, what you need in your matchup. And I think that's how you need to approach fantasy football. But I think Samuel is a ceiling play and Kyron Williams is a safer play.
Yeah, and agree with that because Kyron Williams, especially in a PPR league, which we're assuming that this is, I guess, with saying that he's a safe play, Kyron Williams could get 4 catches for, 10, 12 yards and still put up a decent floor in fantasy. You're hoping that he gets a little bit more than that. Or DeMarcus Robinson or Curtis Samuel is the person that can really have a winning week. So I think that's a great way to put it. DeMarcus Robinson, it's just that's so tough for me. I mean, I just don't think he's that good at football. And he did get a ton of targets last week, but I watch him play. And there's just nothing about Demarcus Robinson that, excites me. I like Devin Duvernay and James Prochet so much better. And it just seems like they can't get the targets for whatever reason. That's a frustrating play. And seeing how volatile this wide receiver room has been for Baltimore, I don't know if I could really advocate to play Demarcus Robinson. I think I'm going with Curtis Samuel out of the bunch. But like you said, if you just need a few points and you're hoping for a safer play, I think Kyren Williams does make sense. Next question comes in from Homer Simpson saying, I have to start 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and 2 flex. I've got Kamara, Saquon, Zeke, Samaje Perine, Olave, Godwin, Kirk, Garrett Wilson, Mooney, and Hollywood. Whew, a lot to take in here. So let's start with the running backs. So looking at Kamara, Saquon, Zeke, and Perine, who are the 2 running backs? I think we're probably going Kamara and Saquon here, right? You boys want to give me a thumbs up if we all agree on that one? All right, Kamara and Saquon are the 2 running backs that we're going with. Receivers, Olave, Godwin, Christian Kirk, Garrett Wilson, Darnell Mooney, and Hollywood. This is where things get a little bit difficult. Jeff, who are the 2 receivers you're taking out of this bunch?
I'll go with Christian Kirk. He's been running very hot over the last month. And then probably Godwin. Yeah. Olave, I think, has a little bit more boom bust potential, whereas Godwin's a little bit more a solid play.
So I think we got that solidified. So those guys are now out of the player pool. Kamara, Saquon, Godwin, and Kirk are out of the player pool. So now we have to pick 2 flexes between Zeke, Samaje Perine, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Darnell Mooney, and Marquise Hollywood Brown. So, Troy, who are the 2 flexes that you're taking out of that player pool? Did you follow this? I know this is a loaded question.
Yeah,
All
so I'm playing Kamara, Saquon, Kirk, Godwin, Olave. I got to pick one more. If Hollywood's active, I'll play him. If he's not active, Samaje Perine.
The only thing I'll swap out, I would say Hollywood, and if Hollywood isn't active, then I'm going with Garrett Wilson over Samaje Perine. But I agree with Olave as well. Jeff, what about you?
No mix, and I'm comfortably putting Perine in my lineup as one of those flex plays. And then I would say Olave. Garrett Wilson, I love the talent. I just want to see that offense with Mike White. And then Hollywood too. I need to see him on the field, I think, before I'm just throwing him back in the lineup.
I think the only thing that's slightly concerning for me with Perine is that they've got a very tough matchup against Tennessee. I mean, Tennessee makes you fight for every single yard that you're going to get on offense. So while Perine really boomed last week, I think that he's going to have a stiffer battle this week. But that's a tough question, Homer. Hopefully we helped you out there. Next question comes in from Ruby Hassel saying, should I play Saquon or Stevenson?
Saquon.
Matt Chen is asking us trade Nick Chubb, Lamar Jackson, Raheem Mostert, and Deontay Johnson for Kyler Murray, Jimmy Garoppolo, Antonio Gibson, Jeff Wilson, Cortland Sutton, Josh Palmer, and Adam Thielen. This is a lot going on. I assume this is a dynasty trade, but if it is, I don't really understand why you'd want guys like Jimmy Garoppolo and Adam Thielen, and I don't know. There's a lot happening in this trade.
Yeah, this has to be super flex. I would think.
Yeah.
I think we can cross Mostert out as being the least valuable. Golly, yeah, that's the struggle with this. You want more context in some of these things, because are all these guys throwing in? Is this a 16-team league and you're starting all these guys, or is it a 12-team league and you're starting 2 of them? But
we do have some context here. He says, I'm on the verge of missing playoffs, and my running backs currently are Chubb, Fournette, and Deonta Foreman, and my wide receivers are Lazard, Lockett, Rondale Moore, and Treylon Burks. So it sounds like this is a redraft trade that I'm guessing is probably super flex. I don't know. This is tough, man.
I keep side A. I just keep Chubb and Lamar. I think
that's what I'm looking at. Yeah, and when you're making a trade this big, I feel like it's a lot of worthless pieces.
And who are you dropping? You're dropping your whole team to accept this. Yeah,
exactly. That's what I'm thinking. I think I'm going with the Chubb and Lamar side here. Even with Lamar's struggles, he can put a 50 burger up any given week, so I'm not too concerned about him.
I agree. I think I'm going to go with that.
So we got a question here. Thoughts on Elijah Moore with Mike White? They did have a connection last year. Millie, we will be done recording in about 15 minutes, and then you can jump to the very front of the show. We opened talking all about the Jets and had some really good conversation there. Trying to find some other questions in here. Give me just a second. Here's one. Can I start Jeff Wilson Jr. over Ken Walker, Dalvin Cook, or Alvin Kamara in PPR this week? I need a W at 5-6, and I am favored in this matchup. So, I feel like I'm the guy who's really been beating the drums for Jeff Wilson Jr. here, but Ken Walker, Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, and PPR. Are you guys thinking about starting him over any of them?
Walker's a RB5 for me this week, and he's comfortably ahead of the rest of this group. And so I certainly would play Walker the most, but then I would play Wilson over the other two, I think.
That's where I'm at. I think that I prefer Dalvin Cook over Wilson, but I do have Wilson ahead of Alvin Kamara. Troy, do you think that's crazy to put in Wilson over Kamara?
I'll have Wilson over Kamara. It's Wilson and Dalvin Cook. That's the one that's a little tricky for me. I'm trying not to sound too much like a homer, but I might play Jeff Wilson over Dalvin Cook. I think I would. I think Jeff Wilson has 100 yards. It should be 100 yards easy. I mean, I think it should be 100 yards easy against the Houston Texans.
I just got to say, I am terrified for the Vikings this week, coming off a beatdown by the Cowboys, and now they get Bill Belichick facing off against primetime Kirk. I mean, we're looking at this team right now sitting at 8-2. Everybody, just last week was crowning them as the best team in the NFL. I'm scared that the wheels are going to fall off this team fast and hard. Next question here,
I agree,
comes from George Cook. Flex Mike Evans, Jamal Williams, or Dameon Pierce in half PPR this week. Hey, how's it going? Troy, who do you want here? Mike Evans, Jamal Williams, or Dameon Pierce?
Dameon Pierce. I think I'm a little worried it'll be like last week, but I don't see Dameon Pierce getting 8 yards again. I don't see that. Dameon Pierce has been one of the most reliable backs in the game. Jamal Williams, you're hoping for the touchdowns. Mike Evans, I'm gonna go Dameon Pierce.
That's where I'm at as well. Jeff, how about you? Are you putting Dameon Pierce ahead of Mike Evans and Jamal Williams? It's a low ceiling play, but
I have Dameon Pierce at 24 and Jamal Williams at 25. So
flip a coin.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and Mike Evans is so boom or bust that I think that I'll go ahead and go with Pierce.
Yeah, that's where I'm at as well. All right, we got one question left in the chat before we log off here. And MLK010 is saying, I have Justin Jefferson as my wide receiver 1 and Treylon Burks as my flex, trying to decide between Josh Palmer, Darius Slayton, and Tyler Lockett for my wide receiver 2. This is a no-brainer for me. You're going with Tyler Lockett. He's putting up top 10 numbers this year. Troy.
Tyler Lockett.
Jeff, are we all in agreement on this one?
Man, I love Joshua Palmer. I love what he's been doing.
I knew he was going to say that.
So
I knew he was going to say that.
Depends what happens with Mike Williams' availability. If Mike Williams is out, I'll play Palmer, but then I'll go with Lockett if he's not.
I mean, it's definitely an interesting discussion to have, and Josh Palmer has looked fantastic
great game
this year. Yeah, it's almost I honestly think that he does better when he gets to play as a secondary or tertiary option on the team. I don't think he's cut out to be a primary receiver, but when you've got Keenan Allen or Mike Williams there to take the pressure off a little bit, I think that's when he can actually cook a little bit better, do what he does best, blow the top off the defense and catch those 60-yard bombs from Justin Herbert like we saw last week.
Yeah.
That being said, I'm still going with Tyler Lockett. Well, guys, I think that's it. We got all of the questions in for this week. Want to remind everybody watching to have a happy and safe Thanksgiving. Before we log off, Troy, let everyone know where they can find you on Twitter.
You can find me at King Mode on Twitter. I'm on other social media platforms, but Twitter's my home base. I appreciate y'all.
Jeff, let everyone know where they can find you.
Number 4, whom J Bell tolls on Twitter. For whom J Bell tolls on Twitter.
And of course, all of the written and video content over at Football Guys. You can find me on Twitter at Dave Kluge. Find Football Guys on Twitter at Football Guys. And most importantly, be sure to subscribe and like this video. You can find everything that Football Guys has to offer video-wise at youtube.com/footballguys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week.